What if the people you trusted most, the ones who raised you, the one you once loved, turned against you, not out of hatred, but out of calculated betrayal? I never expected my father's 70th birthday party to be the day everything cracked. One moment, I was smiling, sipping rosé, watching my daughter twirl around the garden in her lemon-yellow dress. The next, I saw my ex-husband whispering into a stranger's ear with that same smug smirk he wore when he first lied in court. Then my daughter came running, tears streaking her cheeks, voice trembling. "We need to go, now." What she told me in the car made my blood run cold. And that was just the beginning. My name is Julia, and if you'd asked me that morning how I was doing, I would have said surviving. Not thriving, not floundering, just surviving. A single mother, part-time marketing freelancer, sometimes exhausted but always trying. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom duplex in Fairfield, Connecticut, not far from the town I grew up in. My daughter, Lily, she's 10, curious and bright and far too observant for her age, was my reason for everything. That morning, I curled her hair while she sat on the bathroom counter swinging her legs. We were headed to my father's 70th birthday party, an outdoor celebration he'd insisted be casual but upscale, which in Martin's language meant dressy polos, expensive hors d'oeuvres, and a live jazz trio near the koi pond. Typical. I hadn't seen my ex-husband Derek in weeks, and even though we shared custody, he often forgot his weekends or dropped Lily off late with some excuse I'd stopped arguing against. Today, though, he would be there, invited by my father, of course, because Martin still treated Derek like the golden son he never had. And maybe, somewhere deep down, I still wanted to believe we could all be civil for Lily's sake. The garden looked like something out of a magazine. White tents, glass lanterns, champagne glasses sweating in the July heat. My mother, Helen, wore her pearls like armor. She kissed me on the cheek, barely meeting my eye, and directed Lily toward the dessert table. I'd barely had 2 sips of wine when I saw him. Derek. Tall tan, talking to a younger woman in a red dress. He leaned in too close. She laughed a little too loud. He put his hand on the small of her back, and I felt it, that hollow punch of embarrassment, even though I shouldn't have cared. We'd been divorced for 3 years, but somehow it still stung to watch him perform his charm for a new audience, especially here, surrounded by people who used to be our people. I turned away. Focused on Lily, who was showing her cupcake to my father with a proud little grin. I told myself to breathe, just get through the afternoon. Then Lily appeared at my side, eyes wide and wet, her whole body shaking like she'd stepped into a cold pool. "Mom," she whispered, "we have to go now, please." I bent down, heart suddenly racing. What happened? I heard something. I wasn't supposed to. Grandpa and Dad were talking. About me, about taking me, Mom, please. I didn't ask more questions, not yet. I just scooped her into my arms like I used to when she was 3 and ran. We didn't say goodbye. We didn't look back. In that moment, I didn't need to know every word she'd overheard. The look on her face told me everything. Something had shifted, something dangerous, and the celebration had become a warning. That night, in the silence of our car, everything I thought was behind me began crawling back with claws. The car ride home should have been filled with questions. I should have been probing Lily for every word, every detail of what she heard. But I didn't. I couldn't. Her hands were clenched in her lap, eyes fixed on the blur of trees and streetlights outside the window. I knew that look, how kids carry trauma like glass in their chest, afraid that if they breathe wrong, it'll shatter. So I waited. The silence between us wasn't empty, it pulsed with dread. I drove slower than usual, barely noticing the way my fingers tightened around the steering wheel every time her breath hitched. Back in our tiny duplex, I unlocked the door and let her go straight to the couch. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped in her oversized hoodie-like armor. I turned on a lamp, the soft golden light barely touching the edges of the living room. The shadows seemed too long, the air too still. Then she spoke. "I didn't mean to hear it, Mom." "I know, sweetheart," I said gently. "Just tell me what you remember." She hesitated, picked at a thread in the hoodie's sleeve. Then, in a voice that cracked more than once, she said, "I was looking for the bathroom and I heard Grandpa talking to Dad. They didn't know I was there. Grandpa said he said it would be better for me to live with Dad, that maybe it was time." My throat tightened. I stayed still. Then Dad said, "If she agrees to the deal, we won't make it ugly, but if not, well, courts love stability." She looked up at me then, those big brown eyes suddenly wise in the worst way. "What deal, Mom? What did they mean?" I couldn't answer because I didn't know, and that terrified me more than anything. The room felt smaller with each passing second. The beige walls seemed to close in. My father, my own father, plotting behind my back. With Derek, it wasn't just betrayal. It was something else, something calculated. They said I wouldn't have to move far, Lily whispered, almost to herself now. Grandpa said, Julia will come around, she always does. That's when the nausea hit me. They weren't just speculating, they were planning. I got up, needing motion, direction, anything. I walked to the kitchen, ran the faucet, splashed cold water on my face. My reflection in the dark window above the sink looked warped, eyes too wide, lips pale. Come around? Is that how he saw me? As someone to be manipulated, coerced, managed. I was still standing there, frozen, when Lily patted in quietly behind me. I don't want to go, she said. I won't. I turned, forced a smile I didn't feel. You're not going anywhere, baby, I promise. But inside, I knew that promise might already be broken. Because if they'd already talked lawyers, if a petition had been filed, this wasn't just about loyalty anymore. This was war. I tucked Lily into bed that night, her tiny hand gripping mine like it was the only thing tethering her to safety. I sat beside her until she drifted off, her breathing slow and even. Then I crept into the bathroom, locked the door, and finally let myself fall apart. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I just stared at myself in the mirror, at the woman who had survived a brutal divorce, who had built a fragile piece from broken glass, who had made her daughter's lunch every morning and taught her how to ride a bike and read bedtime stories in silly voices even when she was dead on her feet. And now she looked like a ghost of herself. But ghosts don't fight. And I had no choice but to fight, because they thought I'd come around. They thought I'd give in. They forgot I'd already lost everything once, and I hadn't clawed my way back just to watch them take the one thing I had left. There's something about locking a door behind you that feels both safe and damning. The soft click echoed louder than it should have in that tiny bathroom. I didn't plan to stay in there long, but once the lock turned, I sank to the floor, knees folding like someone had pulled the strings out from under me. I couldn't let Lily see me fall apart. She needed me to be her wall, her anchor. But alone in that cramped room with peeling wallpaper and an old medicine cabinet that stuck whenever I tried to open it, I wasn't a wall. I was just a woman, trembling and small and suddenly so tired of pretending I had strength left. The faucet still dripped. The window pane fogged with the cool rain just starting outside. And the mirror, God, that mirror. I stood eventually, just to look. And I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her hair, my hair, was still curled from the party, but it had wilted, clinging to my cheek like ivy in a storm. There were faint makeup smudges beneath my eyes and a tightness in my jaw I hadn't noticed until just now. But what really unsettled me was the hollow behind my eyes, like I'd been emptied. I leaned in closer, and the memory hit like a freight train. The last time I looked this drained, this hollow, was the morning after I found out about Derek's affair. 3 years ago, standing in a hotel bathroom somewhere in New Jersey, holding my phone with the message still open. I remember the hotel wallpaper was striped. I remember there was a mint on the pillow I hadn't eaten. I remember I didn't cry then either, because crying meant surrender. Derek had been so convincing, so rehearsed. It was a mistake, he said. I was lonely. You were so distant after Lily was born. Gaslighting at its finest. What he really meant was, you were too busy being a mother to notice I got bored. He didn't just cheat. He twisted the narrative so well that by the time we reached court, he had turned my exhaustion into evidence. My late-night crying spells, emotional instability, my freelance jobs, unreliable income. His lawyer painted me in broad strokes, fragile, overwhelmed, unfit, and I had no fight left in me then. I let the house go. I let him keep the savings account, the car, even the wedding china his mother gave us. The only thing I refused to surrender was Lily. Now, standing here again with my ex and my father gearing up to take her from me, I felt that same helplessness creeping in. But this time, it was different. This time, I wasn't grieving a marriage. I wasn't licking wounds. I was watching a storm gather from the inside out, and I was about to step into it with nothing but my bare hands. The lights flickered slightly as the wind picked up outside. Rain tapped against the window like impatient fingers. I closed my eyes and let the cold porcelain of the sink support me. What kind of father conspires against his daughter? And for what? A sense of control? Loyalty to Derek? The illusion of family reputation? My mind kept circling that one word, deal. What could they possibly offer me to make me surrender my child? Money, guilt, a promise that she'll be better off. I almost laughed. Almost. Because I had already learned. When men like Derek and Martin talk about what's best, they usually mean most convenient. They think they know what I'll do. They think I'll fold. They think I'm weak. But they've forgotten that I've rebuilt my life from ash once already. And now they're giving me a reason to burn down everything they hold dear. I stood up straighter, wiped my face with a hand towel. The mirror still showed a tired woman, but behind the tired, something else had returned. A flicker. A warning. And outside that door, my daughter was sleeping in the next room, completely unaware that the war for her had already begun. Somewhere deep down, I wanted to believe there had been a misunderstanding. That Lily had overheard something twisted out of context, that my father couldn't possibly have meant what she thought she heard. So 3 days later, I found myself in my parents' driveway, staring up at the beige colonial with its perfect shutters and flower boxes, heart pounding like I was 15 again and about to confess I'd dented the family car. I told Lily I had errands. I left her with Monica, my only friend who still picked up the phone. The sky was cloudy, heavy with the kind of summer heat that makes everything feel more tense. I didn't knock. I had a key. I still had a drawer here, technically. That's what my mother liked to say. You always have a drawer in this house. The moment I stepped inside, the scent of lemon polish and old books wrapped around me like a strange hug. Familiar, suffocating. "Julia," my mother called from the kitchen. I followed her voice, each step like dragging a chain behind me. There she stood, Helen in her pale blue cardigan and beige slacks, stirring something in a saucepan like this was any normal afternoon. She looked up and smiled like nothing was wrong. Like her daughter hadn't fled a birthday party in a panic 3 days ago. "You're just in time," she said gently. "Martin's in the garden trimming the hydrangeas. Sit, I'll make tea." I didn't sit. "Where's Dad?" I asked instead. She gave me that strained smile I knew too well. "He'll be in shortly." I waited in silence. Not even the clink of her spoon against the mug could soothe the scream in my chest. And then he walked in, Martin Bryant, financial planner, neighborhood dignitary, my father. He wore his gardening gloves like armor, still brushing mulch from his sleeves. Well, he said, nodding. "Didn't expect a visit so soon after the dramatic exit." I swallowed. "We need to talk." He peeled off his gloves, not meeting my eyes. "About what?" "You and Derek, I know what you're planning." He sighed, finally turning to face me. "Julia, if you're going to make accusations, at least sit down first." "I'm not here for tea and denial," I snapped. "Lily heard you, heard both of you." That made him pause just for a second. A flicker of irritation passed through his expression like a shadow. "Children mishear things all the time," he said evenly. "But since we're here, maybe it's time we had a grown-up conversation." Helen placed the mugs down between us, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't say a word. Martin folded his arms. "Derek came to me weeks ago. He's concerned. Lily's bouncing between homes, your work is inconsistent, and frankly, your emotional state has been unstable since the divorce." I felt the air leave my lungs. "You think I'm unstable?" I hissed. "I think you're doing your best," he said in that patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. "But sometimes doing your best isn't enough." I looked at my mother then, waiting for her to speak, to intervene, to say anything that resembled support. She just looked down at the tea she wasn't drinking. That silence hit harder than any insult. "You think she's better off with Derek?" I asked, voice cracking. Martin didn't flinch. "He has resources, a structured home, and you've always been emotional. You let things get under your skin." "You mean like being betrayed by my father?" I shot back. He stood then, calm, composed, always the lawyer even when he wasn't practicing. "You could make this easier on yourself. If you cooperate, Derek's offering generous visitation. It doesn't have to be messy." I couldn't breathe, I couldn't blink. "Get out," I whispered. He frowned. "This is my house." "No," I said louder now. "Get out of my head, out of my life, out of the fantasy that you can offer me deals about my own daughter like she's part of a property negotiation." My mother finally looked up. Her lips parted, but no words came. That hurt more than anything my father had just said. "I expected him to turn," I said, eyes burning. "But you were supposed to be my safe place." "Julia," she whispered, but I was already walking. I slammed the front door behind me so hard, a picture frame rattled in the hallway. And as I stood outside, hands shaking, I realized something bitter and true. Sometimes the people who raise you aren't your foundation. They're the first ones to pull the rug out from under your feet. It came in a plain white envelope. No stamps screaming urgent. No aggressive lettering. Just a thin, neatly folded court summons resting in my mailbox like a snake curled to strike. I held it with the tips of my fingers, like touching it too firmly would make it real. Back inside, Lily was at the kitchen table, coloring a map of the United States for school. I didn't want her to see my hands shaking, so I slipped the envelope into the drawer next to the junk mail and walked to the bathroom before I let myself open it. Petition for full custody. Those words burned into my eyes before I even read the rest. Derek had filed. It was happening. No more whispered threats, no more garden party conspiracies. This was war in ink and law. He had actually done it. I slid down to the cold tile floor, the paper fluttering from my fingers. There was a court date 2 weeks away. 2 weeks. I had no lawyer. No money set aside for legal fees. No time to waste. I didn't cry. I moved. The rest of the day blurred into panic-laced motion. I called every contact I could think of, friends, old colleagues, anyone who might know a good attorney. I left voicemails, sent emails, even messaged someone on Facebook I hadn't spoken to since college. Sorry, that's too short notice. I'm already booked solid. This type of case requires prep time we simply don't have. Again and again. By midnight, the hallway was strewn with legal pads, takeout containers, coffee cups, and printouts. My laptop burned hot on my knees as I read custody law forums, looking for something, anything, that said a mother like me could beat a system tilted toward the highest bidder. Lily had gone to bed hours earlier. At some point, she padded out in her fuzzy socks and gave me a hug without a word. She didn't ask what was going on. She knew not to. At 2 a.m., I stared at the ceiling and whispered into the dark, "What if I can't do this?" The house didn't answer. In the morning, I made her breakfast like usual, waffles and strawberries. She drew a smiley face in her syrup with the edge of her fork and said, "You should wear your blue shirt today. It's your strong color." I wore it, and I made more calls. Lawyers, legal aid offices, even a woman named Cynthia who once told me she handled messy custody battles back when we shared a cubicle in 2016. No one would take the case. One lawyer, a kind-sounding man with tired vowels, summed it up best. 2 weeks isn't enough, Julia, and opposing counsel's aggressive. You need strategy, not desperation. Strategy, I had none. The days that followed turned feral. I barely slept. I skipped meals. My laptop lived on the couch beside me, blinking with tabs like warning lights. My phone battery constantly hovered near zero from the flood of rejection emails. Lily watched TV more than I liked. I promised I'd make it up to her. I left voicemails for my parents that went unanswered. Not that I expected anything different. On the 6th night, I found myself sitting in the hallway, literal hallway, knees to chest, surrounded by documents and empty coffee mugs. It looked like a scene from a movie. The sad kind. The kind with violins and whispered monologues. I stared at the clock above the laundry room. 2:47 a.m. It had become my enemy. A constant, ticking reminder that I was running out of time. And somewhere in a big house with white columns and a backyard swing Lily used to love, Derek was sleeping easy, knowing he had the money, the lawyer, the head start. All I had was a dwindling candle, a dozen unanswered messages, and a child I refused to lose. I whispered into the silence again. Just give me one chance, one opening, one person who says yes. I didn't know if I was praying or begging, but I meant every word. Because no matter how many doors slammed in my face, I wasn't going to stop knocking. Not until I tore his whole plan apart. The courthouse smelled like cold coffee and bureaucracy. Even the air felt indifferent, too filtered, too sterile. I stood at the threshold of the family court hearing room, pulse pounding in my ears. The hallway buzzed with lawyers in dark suits, clients whispering nervously, the occasional clang of heels on tile. I kept blinking, trying to clear the sting behind my eyes. I didn't have representation. Not really. One lawyer I'd begged had agreed to sit with me for appearances, but told me up front he wasn't prepared to argue much. He was kind, but detached, like a waiter delivering bad news with a smile. Inside, Derek looked triumphant. Tailored suit. That overconfident swagger he always wore when he thought he'd already won. His lawyer, some polished shark named Brennan, leaned in and murmured things like they were plotting the final move in a chess match. I sat beside my half-lawyer, hands trembling under the table. Lily wasn't here, thank God. Children weren't allowed at this stage, but her name echoed in that room like a ghost with every statement Derek's side made. They said I was emotionally volatile, that I hadn't held a steady job in 2 years, that Lily had complained about my inconsistent routines, that I kept questionable company. A vague nod at Monica, I assumed. I wanted to scream. Instead, I held my breath. When it was my turn, I stood. My voice shook at first. I tried to speak about Lily, how she thrived in our messy, warm little life, how she always knew she was safe, even when money was tight. I talked about bedtime stories, science fair projects, how I once stayed up all night sewing sequins on her Halloween costume because the store version didn't sparkle enough. But it all felt so flimsy against their typed exhibits, their bullet points, their strategy. I watched the judge gray hair, unreadable expression as he sifted through our file like it was just another paper pile on his docket. No emotion, no flicker of empathy, just the cold rhythm of procedure. Then came Derek's last move, a letter, typed, signed, from Martin, stating in neat paragraphs that he believed Lily would benefit from Derek's structure and financial stability, that my emotional state had deteriorated in recent months, that he and my mother would support the transition if custody was awarded to Derek. My knees nearly gave out. They brought my father's words into court to destroy me. I didn't even get to respond before the gavel fell. Temporary full custody to Derek. Visitation rights to be reviewed. My heartbeat slowed as if it didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't cry. I just sat, still as stone, as everyone stood and filed out like it was just another Tuesday. Outside the courtroom, Derek walked past me without a glance. Brennan nodded at my lawyer, polite, efficient. I leaned against the cold hallway wall and tried to remember how to breathe. My phone buzzed with a message from Monica. "How did it go? Tell me you're okay." I stared at the screen, and for the first time in years, I typed back 3 words I never wanted to say. I lost her. There's a particular silence that comes the night after you lose something essential. Not loud, not sobbing. Just absence, like someone turned off the gravity in your soul. I stared at the ceiling until dawn. The sheets on Lily's bed stayed untouched. Her toothbrush in the holder looked too clean. Her sketchbook, open on the table, still held the last picture she'd drawn, a smiling sun with curly eyelashes. I couldn't touch it. I couldn't touch anything. The first call came at 9:16 a.m. from my boss at the marketing firm. He started with the usual pleasantries, then pivoted. "Julia, we've been understanding, but your attendance, your deadlines." I knew what was coming before he finished. I thanked him quietly and hung up before my voice cracked. I was fired. No daughter, no job, no backup, and no one was calling. My parents didn't reach out, not even my mother. Not even after dragging my heart into court and nailing it there like a trophy. I didn't text Monica back. I couldn't. I didn't know how to answer kindness. Not right now. I didn't want her to see me like this, gutted and hollowed out. Rent loomed, utilities stacked. Grocery lists became a joke. By the end of the week, I took the only job that didn't care about my resume or my custody case. Night janitor. Office buildings downtown, mostly empty by 7 p.m. except for the occasional intern still pretending to impress someone. It was quiet, anonymous work. Wipe, sweep, empty bins, repeat. My hands grew calloused, my shoulders ached. But it paid. Barely. Every night I walked past glass-walled conference rooms with ghost reflections of who I used to be. I saw women in fitted blazers, tapping on laptops, laughing with coworkers. That used to be me, a long time ago. Now I cleaned their crumbs. On Sundays I saw Lily, 3 hours. Derek dropped her off at the library parking lot like he was handing over a package. He never got out of the car. Lily always tried to smile. We'd sit together, play card games, read books on the floor. She never asked why we couldn't go home. She never asked what was happening. She just held my hand tightly when it was time to go. I lived for Sundays. The rest of the week, I barely lived at all. One night, after scrubbing coffee stains from a conference table, I sat on the mop cart and scrolled through my phone without purpose. That's when I saw Monica's profile pop up. She'd posted a picture of us from 3 years ago, laughing at a pumpkin patch, both of us windblown and ridiculous. The caption read, "This woman fought harder than anyone I know, and they still tried to break her." She had 600 likes, dozens of comments. I froze, scrolled, read. People were asking questions, commenting with outrage, strangers typing things like, "This is happening to real mothers?" and "Get her a lawyer for God's sake." My stomach twisted. I hadn't asked her to post it. And yet, it was the first time in weeks I felt like someone saw me. Then my phone buzzed again. "Derek, take that post down or you'll never see her again." I stared at the message, every muscle in my body going cold. He meant it, and Monica had no idea what she'd just set off. I had no plan, no power, and if I lost Monica too, I wouldn't just be alone. I'd be erased. It took me almost 2 hours to reply to Derek's message, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I was afraid that whatever I said would make things worse. "Take that post down or you'll never see her again." He didn't need to say more. I knew how easily he could twist the narrative, how quickly he could convince a judge I was an unfit mother for inviting public harassment. He could claim I was endangering Lily's privacy, that I was unstable, vindictive. All it would take was one more hearing. So I did what I always did when cornered. I panicked. I texted Monica. "Emmy, why did you post that, me? Do you realize what you've done? Me, you could ruin everything." 3 dots blinked for a moment, then disappeared. Then her message arrived. "MONICA, I did it because people need to know. You're being railroaded, Jules. You're alone and no one's stepping up. I just wanted to help." The words stung because they were true, but truth didn't matter right now. Fear did. Me, he's threatening to cut off visits. I can't lose her, Monica. A pause. "MONICA, so you want me to take it down, me?" "Yes." The post vanished within minutes. But the comments lingered, captured, screenshotted, shared. It had already spread. I knew Derek would find a way to use that. Later that night, Monica showed up at my door. She didn't knock gently, she pounded, her boots scuffing the welcome mat she bought me last Christmas. I opened the door to her narrowed eyes and crossed arms. "I was trying to save you," she said. "No," I snapped. "You were trying to save the idea of me. The strong friend, the underdog story. You didn't ask what I wanted." Her face hardened. "What you want doesn't matter anymore, Julia. You're in survival mode, and survival doesn't wait for permission." I felt my throat tighten. "You're not the one losing your child." "I was the one trying to help," she shot back. We stood there, 2 women who had cried together, laughed through wine nights, helped each other move apartments, now divided by a single digital action and a chasm of fear. "I can't have more chaos," I whispered. She didn't say anything for a moment. "Then, you know what hurts most?" Her voice trembled now softer. "Not that you asked me to take it down, that you didn't even say thank you." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. She nodded like that silence told her everything. "Take care of yourself, Julia." She turned, walked down the steps, and didn't look back. I closed the door, leaned against it, and slid down to the floor. The house felt quieter than ever. The walls thinner. The nights longer. I'd pushed away the last person who believed in me. And for what? To keep a thread of custody rights, to play by Derek's rules, to prove I was stable enough not to have a meltdown when someone fought for me. I wanted to believe I did the right thing. But all I could feel was the echo of a friendship breaking like glass. The email came on a Tuesday morning, buried between overdue bill reminders and a promo from a pet food company. I almost deleted it without reading. Subject line, "RE, your custody case confidential legal assistance available." At first, I assumed it was a scam. One of those predatory services promising help and draining the last $20 from your account in return. But something about the language stopped me. It wasn't selling anything. It knew things. Inside the message, a woman named Dana Ross introduced herself as part of a legal alliance, an informal network of attorneys who monitored social media for underrepresented custody battles. She mentioned seeing Monica's now-deleted post. She referenced the court date, the judge, even Brennan, Derek's lawyer. And then the line that made me stop breathing. "There is evidence suggesting your ex-husband's attorney has a prior relationship with the presiding judge, one that may not have been disclosed." I read it 5 times before standing up. My legs shook. I paced the tiny kitchen, staring at the email like it might evaporate. It felt unreal. Too clean, too perfect. Could I trust it? Still, I replied. I gave her a phone number, said I couldn't pay, but I'd be grateful for even a second opinion. Dana called within the hour. Her voice was steady, low, not overly cheerful. Exactly the tone someone uses when they know they're handing you a lifeline and don't want you to get too excited until you've got both hands around it. "Julia," she said, "we're offering full representation. Pro bono. If what we suspect proves true, we can not only reopen the case, we may be able to press for a reversal and potentially damages." I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. How did you even find me?" "Sometimes the internet gets it right," she said. "Your friend put a flare in the sky, people saw." I almost laughed through the lump in my throat. "Monica, after everything, after I pushed her away." I swallowed. "I'm not sure I'm strong enough to go through all this again." "You already are," Dana said, matter of fact. "You've done the hard part. Now we make the system answer for it." That afternoon, I took the train to Manhattan. The firm wasn't a fancy high-rise. Just a modest office on the 9th floor, with mismatched chairs in the waiting area and a coffee machine that wheezed when it poured. But inside that little conference room, they laid out a plan like generals before battle. They had documents, connections between Brennan and the judge going back years. Country club memberships, campaign contributions, quiet weekend retreats. Dana said it wouldn't be easy, but with enough public pressure and the right motions, they could force a review. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. They wanted the world to watch. They wanted to expose a pattern, not just a case. "We're building momentum," Dana said, tapping her pen against a notepad. "Public interest is growing. Your story is resonating." I sat very still. My story, not as a failure, not as a broken woman, but as a mother who wouldn't go quiet. That night, I walked the city streets until my feet ached, past people laughing outside cafes, cabs honking, lights buzzing overhead. And for the first time in weeks, I looked up, not down. The stars were hidden behind skyscrapers, but I knew they were still there, waiting just like me. I always thought justice moved like thunder, loud, fast, undeniable. But it doesn't. It moves like rain dripping through cracks. Slow, quiet, inescapable once it starts. Dana and her team wasted no time. Within days, the wheels turned. Motions were filed, subpoenas issued. The court was forced to open an internal review, an inquiry into possible misconduct between Brennan and the judge. A second judge was appointed, one with no local affiliations. The tone shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't the one on trial, they were. At home, I kept my life painfully quiet. I still worked nights, though the mop felt lighter in my hands, not because the work changed, but because I did. I had a team now, a voice. I wasn't begging for help anymore. I was demanding answers. Dana updated me constantly. She never sugarcoated the odds, but made me feel like I wasn't crazy for believing this whole thing had been rigged from the start. And it had been. Emails surfaced, old correspondence between Brennan and the judge. Nothing explicit, but enough to suggest familiarity far beyond professional boundaries. Photos from charity galas, comments on vacation posts, even receipts from a resort weekend billed to Brennan's firm just days before our custody hearing. One morning, I sat in the firm's office as a legal assistant named Yvonne flipped through printed screenshots like they were wanted posters. "This isn't just favoritism," she said. "It's influence." I nodded, numb but grateful. "So what happens now?" Yvonne looked up. "We show the court what they tried to hide, and we do it publicly." The local press caught wind of the story after that. A small parenting blog picked up Monica's deleted post, somehow recovered through cached pages, and ran a headline that started with, "Mom loses child in rigged custody battle." From there, it snowballed. Comments, shares, interviews. Even a podcast wanted to feature my side. At first, I said no, but Dana gently pushed. "Your silence protected them before," she said. "Your voice might save others now." So I spoke. Not as a victim, but as a witness. I told them about the courtroom, the way I was dismissed, the silence of my parents, the late nights, the hallway filled with documents and despair. And something happened. People listened. They wrote in, shared their own stories, sent messages I didn't expect. "You're speaking for all of us." They did this to my sister too. "Thank you for not disappearing." The pain that had made me feel so alone was suddenly proof of how not alone I was. Even Lily sensed it. And she came on her Sunday visit. She brought a magazine with the article clipped and folded into her notebook. "Miss Perry showed it to me," she whispered, like a secret. "She said you're brave." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from crying. "Miss Perry's right," I said. "You make me brave." It was subtle, the shift, but real. Derek stopped smirking during handoffs. Brennan grew less confident in his filings. My father's name was nowhere near the case anymore, likely by legal advice. And Helen. She hadn't called, not once, but I didn't flinch when her silence echoed. Because for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly who I was: a mother, a fighter, a witness who refused to be silenced again. And as the second court date approached, I didn't tremble. I stood taller. Because this time, the courtroom would see everything. The second courtroom looked just like the first. Same sterile lighting, same stiff chairs, same scent of old paper and polish. But it didn't feel the same. Because this time, I wasn't walking in with a frayed heart and borrowed hope. I walked in beside Dana and her team, 4 determined women in charcoal suits, with binders thick enough to hold every lie Derek and Brennan ever crafted. The room was packed. Too packed. Rows filled with quiet faces, some I didn't know, some who recognized me from the blog posts, the articles, the podcast. I even caught a glimpse of Monica near the back, arms folded, expression unreadable. I didn't look away. The judge, new, sharp, and visibly unimpressed with the circus that had unfolded, called the room to order. It started calmly enough. Brennan tried to minimize everything. Harmless association. Coincidental timing. unfounded suspicions. But Dana stood like iron. She laid out every connection, every dinner receipt, every whisper masked as coincidence. She read the emails slowly, deliberately, letting each line hang in the room like smoke. And when she handed over the sworn affidavit from a former paralegal who witnessed Brennan bragging about his easy win thanks to a favorable bench, the shift was seismic. The courtroom buzzed. The judge raised her brow. And for the first time, Derek looked unsure. When it was my turn, I took the stand. I didn't script my words. I didn't rehearse. I told the truth. I spoke of Lily, of her tears that day at the party, of the deal I was never offered because it was never meant to be a deal, it was a trap. I spoke of the silence from my own parents, the job I lost, the hallway filled with notes and coffee cups. I didn't cry until I said her name. Lily. I looked out into the room, into Monica's eyes. I wasn't fighting for revenge or for pride. I was fighting because a little girl with a crooked smile and a sketchbook deserves to know that her mother didn't give up when things got hard. She deserves to know that truth matters, that justice matters. I didn't look at Derek as I stepped down. He didn't look at me either. The judge didn't deliberate long. Not this time. Custody reversed. Supervised visitation for Derek until further review. Formal review of misconduct filed against Brennan. Damages granted. It didn't feel real until I heard the gavel. Even then, I didn't breathe until I felt Lily's arms around me outside the courthouse. She had been waiting with Dana, clutching a little stuffed tiger I'd given her on her 5th birthday. "Are we going home now?" she asked, voice muffled against my coat. I nodded. We didn't take the subway. We walked, block after block, her hand in mine, her laughter bouncing off the buildings like music. The sun had dipped behind the skyline by the time we reached our street. I unlocked the door. She ran inside, straight to the kitchen, asking for spaghetti and bedtime stories. And as I stood there, keys still in my hand, the hallway washed in evening light, I felt it. Not victory, not vengeance, just peace. Hard-earned, bloodied, but mine. I walked in, closed the door behind us, and breathed in the quiet. This time, it didn't hurt. This time, we were home.